everybody, and happy Friday. Today I want to talk just a little bit about stage presence. And I've done a few videos on related topics before. For instance, I did videos on the inner game of music, the inner game of tennis. I did one called The Perfect Day, a video about visualization techniques. Today I want to talk about those moments while you're actually on the stage and what your audience is experiencing from you as a performer. I don't know if you would ever have come across this saying that if you go to a concert and you hear someone great perform, you have the feeling that you're alone with them in their living room and they're singing or playing or performing just specifically to you. And I don't know if you've had that feeling. I have, and I want to tell you a few of those instances so that you know what I'm talking about. But first of all, I want to address what is it that makes you feel very connected and that you're communicating directly with a great performer. Maybe pause the video for a second and think about that. The most important thing that I believe is needed is authenticity. Your audience wants to feel that they are genuinely getting a window into who you are. You're transparent. The experience is all about communication. So the artist's ego should not feel like it's coming into play. The artist's insecurities also should not feel like a factor in the performance, and sometimes they're one and the same. We all have our funny little mannerisms as performers, but they shouldn't feel like they're about ego or about impressing people. It should feel like it's all about communicating. As a performer, your ultimate goal while you're on the stage is to reach the most authentic, free, communicative, expressive performance that you possibly can. This is much easier said than done. And before we get to that point, as performers, we tend to develop a set of basic stage presence coping skills. These are not bad things to use, and sometimes you start out using one or two of them, and then you find your way to that very authentic communication while you're on the stage. So let's mention a few of these stage presence coping tools that can get us to this better, higher place of communicating and not being afraid of our audience. Because the audience can sense fear. You've probably heard of some of these before. One that makes the rounds as a suggestion is that you can get out on stage and imagine that everyone in your audience is naked. Now, I've actually never used this technique, but I can see the point behind it, that if you feel intimidated by your audience, if you do something to put them in a similar situation where they're less comfortable and less confident, it could boost your own confidence level. My technique that I use quite often at the beginning of a big concert is rather than using that first one, I like to think of 2 or 3 of my best, closest, most supportive friends who I know genuinely value and love me. And I think of them sitting in the very back of the hall. Even though I can't see them there, I tell myself that they're there. I know that they want nothing but my success. And if I think of sending my energy to a few close friends like that, I feel very good about sending my energy out into the hall and not holding back, not being afraid of the audience. There are various things that may happen to us when we're nervous. We may get dry mouth, we may get shaky. I talked about how to deal with those things in another video as well, but related to my thought of telling yourself that you have very close supportive friends in the audience, think of your entire audience as supportive. Remind yourself that people attend concerts to enjoy them. They don't attend them because they want to pick the performer apart. The point in attending a concert is to connect with the performers and enjoy yourself. If people are there in your audience, trust them that they're there for the right reasons, even if a handful of them may not be. There may be some people out there that are wishing for your destruction, but don't focus on them if so. And let's hope that's not the case. Why would anyone go to a concert and say to themselves, you know, I hope this concert is going to be just terrible? And I can tell you, as a musician who's often also an audience member, I'm always rooting for the performers. This goes for performances, it also goes for competitions and auditions. Every single student who comes and does an audition for me, every single competition I judge, I want each and every last performer to have the best experience possible. I want them to walk away feeling like they had a good time, that they did the best they could. If they stumble into a little trouble while they're performing, my heart goes out to them each and every time. Trust other audience members to feel that for you when you are up there performing. Once you have command of those basic stage presence tools, you want to expand to what we could call today advanced stage presence. What I think defines advanced stage presence is that you can abandon those coping tools. You've reached a place with your performance, with your audience, perhaps with your career, that you don't need to rely on those little tricks every time you get up and perform in order to communicate with your audience. The very best performances transcend those coping tools. All performers may need to return to coping tools throughout their career, but it becomes easier and easier to leave them behind and trust yourself, trust your audience on stage. It is all about trust. Let me tell you just a couple of examples of live performances I've witnessed where I clearly felt the performer transcend those coping tools and fully reach and engage with the audience. The first I ever remember experiencing was when I was in high school and flutist Jean-Pierre Rampal came to Utah to perform as a soloist with the Utah Symphony. As you might expect, he came to play a Mozart concerto. I went and attended with a high school friend of mine, and we were sitting pretty far back in the hall. He came out to play the Mozart, and if you know either Mozart concerto, this was G major, they have very long introductions before the flutist starts. Rampal walked out into the hall. He did all the normal communication with the orchestra and the conductor and the audience. The orchestra started to play. He stood there for quite a while waiting to play, and while the orchestra was playing the introduction behind him, he looked like he was having the best day of his life. Like, isn't it wonderful that we can all be here? Aren't we all having the best time we've ever experienced? He looked out all around the audience, smiling, and it felt like he was seeking out each individual member of the audience. And once he started to play, none of that feeling went away. It felt like the most delightful music, the most joyful experience, and Mozart should feel like that. That's the first time that I said to myself, now I know why people say that with great performers you feel like you are in their living room with them. Another one that stands out to me because it happened at the Metropolitan Opera in New York. And if you know that hall, if you've ever been to the Met, you know that the hall is humongous. There are tiers upon tiers of seats. There's a huge audience, and it's generally a good audience. They fill up the place. When I was a doctoral student at Juilliard and I was very poor, I would go hear operas standing room only. They had $11 tickets. You stand in the back of the hall, and so you're far back away from the performers. I did this for an opera where Placido Domingo was singing. And I remember that as he sang an aria, I completely forgot where I was. It was so expressive. I was so wrapped up in what he had to tell me through his performance. I literally forgot that I was standing there. I felt like it was just him and me in a very small, intimate setting like his living room perhaps. And I experienced a jolt when I realized I was still standing in the Met Opera House at the very back and he was far away from me. And I thought, there are thousands of people here and likely many of them just had the same feeling that I did. And that's when I said to myself, now I know beyond his voice why someone like Placido Domingo is a great performer. A real sign for me when I've been pulled in like that is that I have a jolt remembering where I am, remembering that I'm still connected to a time and place. And I feel that fairly often as a performer. I usually don't get quite that carried away, but I could name for you 3 times, I won't go into all the details, 3 times that spring to mind right now when I was performing a very expressive piece of music and I felt so caught up with the experience and communicating with the audience that I forgot I was on a stage. I forgot any reason to be afraid. I was simply communicating, and then I had a jolt of, I'm still on the stage, I'm still performing. And for me, the test of those moments is that there's absolutely no need for a coping mechanism. It's not about that, it's about being expressive. We're letting go of all the little differences that divide us, and we're very united in a musical experience. I know this episode has not been very scientific. I haven't given you a lot of data or specific ways to practice this. The most specific way to practice it, honestly, is to perform often. The more you perform, the more you build up your comfort level and come to trust yourself and your audience. So practice by finding performance opportunities for yourself. When you find those moments that feel transcendent, that's when you know this is why you've chosen to do music. We live for these moments of transcendence and communication and connection that go beyond language and that we can achieve no matter what culture we're in. In fact, I just remembered another moment of transcendence, and I must tell you, I was playing a concert in South Korea. I was playing at a center for cerebral palsy. We started to play a Korean pop song that I had learned for this group of concerts that we were doing. And there started to be quite a stir in the audience, and I thought, oh no, we're losing their attention. What should I do? How do I draw them back into the performance? And then within a matter of seconds, I realized they were singing along. They knew this Korean pop song and they wanted to sing it with us. And it was a moment of such amazing connection and transcendence. And of course, I forgot to care about anything else that was going on and just enjoyed these transcendent moments. Those members of my audience did not speak English. I did not speak Korean. That was a moment of connection far beyond any we could have had speaking either language or any language. Music is so important to every culture and helps us connect across cultures and across times with composers who've written great music centuries ago. COVID has been a very difficult time for performing musicians. We all know this, but let's get back to it and not take for granted what an amazing way music is to connect with each other, transcend our differences, be united by our humanity and what gives us empathy with each other. These are really lofty and worthwhile goals, and if you can keep focused on the fact that that's really what music is about, it does make stage presence kind of take care of itself once you've performed enough. You have to perform enough. You have to develop that comfort level with being on stage. That's all there is to it. Don't blame yourself if it takes a while to get to the point of feeling authentic. You have to develop that with practice, just as you develop technical proficiency with practice in a different setting, your practice room. Have a great weekend. Listen to some great music. Go to a great performance if you're able and see what those performers do on stage.